Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Nerds of the North podcast. Today, we are going to be discussing the most recent episode of What If. Specifically, this episode focuses on Killmonger from the Black Panther film. And as always, I am host number one, Matt, and joining me today, as always, is host number two.
This is Nick. Happy to be here.
We're going to talk about What If. We're also probably going to talk about a bunch of other stuff too, because it's a relatively short show and we have other hobbies, so whatever. So Nick, what did you think of the episode? What did you think of this episode of What If?
I probably should have formulated my thoughts before you asked me what
I demand your input right now.
Well, in that case, I'll just spit out a bunch of words, and if it makes sense, it makes sense. I thought it was fine. I feel like that's a lot of my responses to how I think individual episodes. I think it was fine. I think it was relatively well made. Mm-hmm. I thought it flowed well. Killmonger, though, I thought they were going to go with a route where he was actually going to end up being good, but that wasn't the direction they went. But this episode, really, honestly, this is like the first one that I watched where it really felt like the first part of like at least a 2-part series. Mm-hmm. But looking back, or 2-episode like series, or arc, it seemed like it did not have enough time to like complete its story. But looking back at now that I'm thinking about it, at some of the episodes previously from earlier in the season, like especially the zombie episode, that one does really feel like it would have had a second part to it as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of wondering if season 2 of What If, when it comes out eventually, who knows when that's going to be, Kevin Feige, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I have a feeling a lot of these like kind of random storylines are kind of going to come together, because every episode's ended with a cliffhanger, and none of the cliffhangers, I think, have been expounded upon any further. I think, right? Because like we had one with zombie Thanos. We had one with Peter Quill's dad showing up.
Yep. We
had another one. What's another one that they kind of ended with a cliffhanger? They've done it a lot.
Yeah, like I think, and that's what I'm curious about, what they're going to be doing with this show, because they can kind of do whatever, right? Because in theory, there aren't going to be any real consequences for like the larger cinematic universe that we're aware of from this show. So they kind of just do whatever, but still be using the same talent that we all know and love for all the different films and shows. So like, I really wish they'd do something kind of crazy with some of this, but like from what we've seen, there's zombie Thanos, there's Ego with Peter Quill, with like none of the family that he built through the Guardians, and he just like grew up working like fast food in a podunk town. And then what else? I'm trying to think. Like what other like kind of post-credit scenes we might
well, I guess the first episode had Peggy jumping out of the Tesseract, right? Tesseract portal or whatever.
Yeah, like where Loki originally came from.
Yeah, and then the third episode was with Ant-Man, or with the Avengers getting killed off by Ant-Man. I don't remember if that one had a cliffhanger. It probably did. I just don't remember.
I mean, I know that it showed like all their gray, or like their caskets at the end. Yeah. It was like kind of more of lamenting their loss more than anything.
And definitely, like, I think like the episode with Doctor Strange, that one felt like the most complete episode as far as like a whole arc kind of playing out, and it's sort of just ending, which I think probably that's why that was one of the stronger ones of the season, because it felt kind of like a whole story and not just the beginning of a grander tale that we're not getting the whole picture of, a wider picture of how it's going to play out.
Yeah, and that's well, and that's a huge reason as to my gripe with this most recent episode. Mind you, I really enjoy Michael B. Jordan. Like, I think he's a he's a fun actor to begin with, but like I enjoy like the reference to him liking anime in the episode. I thought was really funny because he was a voice actor on a Rooster Teeth production called Genlock that I thought was really cool, kind of like anime Power Rangers, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I mean, those robots did look like something that'd be out of an anime. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's like Michael B. Jordan and Maisie Williams and David Tennant. Like, it's got like a huge cast of like really high profile names.
Not to completely derail the conversation either, because I don't want to, but is there some sort of controversy with Rooster Teeth recently?
I mean, which one are you talking about?
Okay, we can talk about it later. I just saw someone.
We can talk about that a little bit. There's been some stuff that's come out like in the last year that's been a bit of an issue.
Okay, I think that was what it was getting at, maybe. Anyway,
yeah,
back to the episode. I didn't mean to completely like.
But no, yeah, like regarding this last episode of What If, again, speaking of Rooster Teeth, this episode to me frustrated me in exactly the same way as most of like the last 2 years worth of Ruby kind of upsets me. And that is that like your bad guy is so like omnipotent and powerful and one step ahead of you that they never lose. Like in Ruby, that just happens constantly. Like the protagonists of that show never win, like ever. Like it just never happens. They're constantly getting their teeth kicked in. And like that is like a theme that should go on for a while, but then like there should be some payoff, right?
Yeah,
like
I feel like the audience needs a catharsis. I mean, that goes back to the ancient Greeks, right? So
yeah, and just like it feels like why am I even watching these people do their thing when they suck so badly at it always, you know? Like it's not so much a story of a bunch of heroes as it is a story of about a bunch of losers who never accomplish anything. Yeah. And like that idea kind of transfers into this What If episode in that like one, it's a little samey. It's like, what if Killmonger were like eviler? You know, it's like, and I know that like it's What If, so like the whole timeline is put into question as far as like when things are happening. But I was thinking about this today of like when exactly did Black Panther happen canonically in the MCU?
It was after Age of Ultron. I think it was definitely after Civil War, because that's when that movie introduced Black Panther.
Now that's like 10 years after the first Iron Man movie, right? Like roughly, like it might be sub 10 years, but like it's still close.
Yeah, I know there's a huge there's controversy within the MCU, like with MCU fans, that apparently Far From Home, or sorry, the first Spider-Man movie, Homecoming, had like 8 years later in it or something from like the Avengers, if you remember that. Yeah. You were like trying to figure out this timeline doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And honestly, I never really cared that much to think about it too much. And it's like, oh, whatever, I don't really care. So
see, the Spider-Man one, I'm not aware of. I'm going to be honest. I'm not aware of that controversy at all. But when it comes to this episode, the reason I bring it up is because the content of this episode takes place within the time frame of the first Iron Man movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about it. So he obviously, Killmonger, he graduated from some prestigious university. I can't remember which one. And I think he's a Marine, right?
I think so. He's in the military for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously highly trained. I'll say Marine because I don't remember. I think he was a Marine. So I'm thinking like, well, if this movie, let's say that he was 23 in this episode, and then in the Black Panther movie, he might be like 33. I guess that's not out of the realm of possibility, but I will say that it's stretching things a little bit, I think.
Yeah, well, and like we see him without his shirt on at one point, which like even the digital version of Michael B. Jordan can't be caught without his shirt off at some point. But like, he's still all scarred up. Like his torso is covered from like top to bottom with these scars from like all the kills he's had. Like,
That's
what version
true.
of Killmonger are we being served here? Like, because this looks exactly like a better equipped version from the Black Panther film we saw years ago. So like, this is definitely a nitpick and not like the bulk of my problem with the episode, but it does frustrate me that like in terms of timeline, that this version of Killmonger would not have been a thing when Tony first got attacked in, it was Afghanistan, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I do believe so. Yeah.
That like when that initial moment happened when he was hit by his own weapon with this missile with the shrapnel,
Yeah.
like being saved by Killmonger at that point, like Killmonger would have been like a teenager at that point, from my understanding of the timeline. And I could absolutely be wrong, but like,
I mean, I think it's a fair criticism. Even if he, I mean, 10 years is a long time between. I think he would have looked, at least he would have been a little bit more mature and hot-headed, I would think. You know, because when you're like, let's say he's 23, like yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's something to be said there, but at the same time, it's, a whole story packed within like 20 minutes. So
yeah,
like,
so
I can't criticize it too much. And they can hand wave it away and say, yeah, different timeline.
yeah, and that's immediately what comes to my mind is of like, it's what if, it's whatever, they happen at different times. Like, so valid. Okay, fine. Getting into the bulk of my argument of this episode, my wife actually put it very poignantly, and it really nailed on the head like what bothered me is it's the Ruby argument, but like Killmonger is a Mary Sue in this episode. Like he's perfect in every way. Like he has a plan and he executes it perfectly for every single situation. He's perfectly outfitted for every issue that comes his way. Like he's perfect. There's like nothing that can stop him in the whole episode. He takes down so many high level characters from the MCU effortlessly, fools so many characters effortlessly throughout the entire episode.
Tony Stark,
Rhodey,
Brody,
Tony Stark,
Black Panther, T'Challa, like effortlessly, tricks T'Challa's dad.
Yeah, whereas like in the original film, he barely manages to trick one character, like much less this whole slew of people.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess Shuri caught on, so
she did. Also, what is the timeline in this? And that like
that's true. Like, shouldn't she be like 5 years old?
Right? Yeah, like she's. Yeah. I mean, she's young.
That's a better one than Killmonger, because I don't know how they would,
like Killmonger's like the age he is in Black Panther, but like Shuri is all of a sudden like 13. Like,
yeah, it's a little weird. I will grant you. Point to Matt Slacks. I mean, I kind of understand why they had to do that, but at the same time, yeah, if they're gonna go that route where they were gonna bring back these characters, I feel like they should have made it make sense within. Because Iron Man was the first MCU movie, so
yeah, and so like it's kind of like it's the branching point for all of these films. So like if you're gonna canonically, I mean, I guess timeline wise it's not like canonically the first, but regardless, like in everyone's eyes, Iron Man was the first film, right? So like it should kind of have a bit of a bedrock position as to like what happens when, before and after.
What do you think of Tony Stark constantly getting killed off on this show?
I mean, like poetic, maybe. Like he's in like every other. I mean, I guess if we want to reach into the MCU for this, Doctor Strange looked into how many universes for a solution to the problem with Thanos in terms of like how do we beat him. So surely the universes we're seeing are possible outcomes that we've seen or that we've now been exposed to that Doctor Strange would have seen in his brief head weighty meditation that he went on.
Yeah. Which does
So
call the question when when Loki actually split the timelines like that. It's kind of like it's like one of I forget what they call it, but like a time loop where it doesn't really make sense, like what actually caused it. Because if you think about it, it's like, oh well, like Loki, he got sent on a divergent timeline, but like at the same time, like that was affected by what happened in Endgame that even happened, right?
see now, okay, so you're following the rules of Back to the Future time travel, which Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame specifically seek out to clear up. It's the most convoluted bullshit.
Well, I'm just like trying to think because obviously when Loki, the season finale of that one, like the timeline got crazy, right? So
Mhm.
hence that created what if sort of. Now there's like a crap ton of timelines, but that only happened because something that happened in Endgame where
Mhm.
that timeline, they went back in time to fix their timeline, and then that made Loki go to another timeline, which then caused all the timelines to split. But that happened all the way back in the Avengers, like that. So it's like something in the future caused something that happened in the past. So it's
Yep.
actually causing this whole circle to start because there's no like beginning or end to it. It's like
Yeah,
a
well, because like in the Avengers, like I think for me personally anyway, like the easiest way for me to understand it is by looking at Gamora specifically. So the Gamora that we know and love is dead. She's gone. But as of the events of Endgame, the Gamora that we met initially in the first Guardians movie, where she is like halfway through the movie, that's the Gamora that we are now exposed to in
yeah.
Endgame. So um, her future that we know about doesn't like have any play anymore, but she traveled backwards in time with Thanos to to end things with Thanos.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm not even gonna try to understand it. I'm just having a good time with it. Like it is what it
Yeah,
is, and it's
yeah.
weird. And I kind of like that it's weird and it doesn't make sense.
So like
Like it doesn't have
her,
to make sense to me. Like I'm completely okay with it not making sense. I know other people probably wouldn't be, but I kind of like that about it. So
yeah, like, but basically, like her past is now, or like the past is now her present, and the future's unknown, and the past has been like overwritten essentially. So because really, when you think about it, like when Gamora and Thanos travel back in the past, there's actually another Gamora running around and another Thanos for that matter at the same time
oh
when
yeah,
the
yeah.
end of Endgame is going on.
Uh, would there be? No, there wouldn't be.
Sure, sure, wouldn't there be?
I don't think so because that Thanos and Gamora came.
It's taking place like just before the events of the like Infinity Saga, but like there's no reason why they wouldn't be there.
Oh man, I'm so confused. Are you talking about like the finale of Endgame?
Yeah.
Because doesn't that technically take place like that? That's not in another timeline. That's like at the very end of.
Or wait, no, they don't go back in time. They travel forward,
Well, because
right?
I thought they were from a different universe technically. So
No, I don't think they're from a different universe. I think they're from a different timeline.
sorry. Well, I don't know. Like I think in Marvel, like so far, I think the timeline and the universe, like I don't really know the difference at this point. You know, I don't know if there's
Let's see,
I think
because
it's just like a
the
divergent timeline. I guess
no,
what I'm
yeah,
saying is I
the
think if they came, so technically at that point in our main timeline, or the
mhm,
sacred timeline, we'll go with their terminology.
mhm.
Thanos had already been killed, and so
Yeah,
had
yeah.
Gamora.
No, you're totally right. So there's only one Gamora and one Thanos
Yeah,
at
at
the
the
end
end
of
of,
Endgame.
yeah.
So yeah, you're totally right there. I was incorrect.
But I understand your confusion because
Mhm. Yeah,
I've just
no,
been
yeah.
talking about how it does it like this. It's and I think it's only gonna get crazier too with like, the new
Mhm,
Spider-Man coming out, obviously, and then Doctor Strange. And there's a lot of people that think that Secret Wars is being set up, and I kind of went into that in a previous episode,
mhm.
which would be, in my humble opinion, IMHO. I think IMHO. I think it would be kind of cool to do a Secret Wars. Personally, I think that'd be pretty cool. And I hope
Mhm.
Doom is a part of it.
Oh yeah, no, I hope Doctor Doom is.
Also, have you heard the leaks about what's at the end? Apparently the end credit of Venom 2,
Mhm.
that apparently there's some sort of crossover gonna be between Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Tom Hardy's Venom.
I
And
mean, so so kind of a deep cut, I guess. So there was an animated version of Spider-Man that came out like post 2010. Um, Spider-Man series post 2010. The only reason I say post 2010 is that like I know came out at a point. Was it the Spectacular Spider-Man? This looks old already.
Spectacular Spider-Man.
Surely 2008 to 2009, maybe this is the one. Now the only reason I'm bringing this up, Spectacular Spider-Man. No, this is totally one. Yeah, so Spectacular Spider-Man. So definitely more of like a kid-oriented Spider-Man show. But the reason I bring this up is because there's a storyline specifically um, where Peter is facing off against the Sinister Six, and the only reason he's able to beat them initially is because he ends up using the Venom, the symbiote spider suit. And like the first time he actually like fights the Sinister Six in that show is that he's not even awake at the time. The symbiote suit is just like controlling Spider-Man's body and like fighting the Sinister Six and like fending them off like borderline no problem. And so that comes to mind in that like this third Spider-Man movie, Tom Holland's Spider-Man might come in contact with the Venom suit as a means to be able to deal with all of the additional villains that he ends up dealing with.
And it seems too, and unfortunately, I should know more about the second credit scenes. I just know it seems that there might be some universe like multiverse shenanigans going on. That's why Venom can cross over into Tom Holland's Spider-Man.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's not as simple as them both being within the same MCU, because I think Venom
Mhm.
2, or that Venom verse, is actually, and this isn't confirmed or anything, but I think it's actually Sony's own thing. And
Oh yeah, no,
yeah,
I think Disney is wanting to like keep that property at arm's length, which I think is totally
yeah.
fair.
It was like they recently renamed it, but I think it was originally like Sony's, like it was some weird like Spider-Man universe of characters, or it was some dumb thing, and like the acronym ended up being Spunk.
Spunk.
I gotta look it up now. But yeah, it was like Spunk, and like people, that sounds like something
But I
bad, right?
mean, the way you're describing that does make sense to me because I know that like Sony Sony has the rights not only to just Spider-Man, but they have a lot of rights to other characters within the Spider-Man universe.
So just to get this out there, it's Sony's Spider-Man universe or Spunk. Oh, sorry, Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters.
That's where this spunk.
Spunk.
But like that does make sense to me, just in terms of like legalese that like Sony has access to. Like that's why Vulture's a thing. That's why Venom's a thing. That's probably why we're gonna be
Well, there's
in-
Mobius too. Apparently, that's coming out.
Yep, Mobius, like because they have a huge catalog of characters at their disposal just by having access to Spider-Man properties. That's that's Kraven the Hunter, that's Carnage, Black Cat, Doc Ock, Scorpion, Shocker,
Yeah, Miles Morales.
Miles Morales, like
Gwen Stacy, obviously. Then all the Sinister Six characters got.
Yeah, I mean, Goblin, Hobgoblin. You have like your way more niche characters like Hydro Man, I think, like the water-based villain, like Sandman. You know, like they have a whole host of characters they can pull from for villains for films and for heroes in films. Like, part of me is honestly kind of surprised they're not trying a Black Cat film.
And I bet they will. I have heard they're working on a Spider Woman film.
Do they have Spider Woman technically through that license? I mean, like, I guess
I think they have all the characters. They have Spider-Man and all the characters associated with Spider-Man. So
see, I always thought like Spider Woman was kind of like a weird loophole type character, and that like she's only very loosely associated by means of the word spider to Spider-Man. But I could definitely be wrong there.
I think Sony has a little bit of an issue though too, because if you think about a lot of these characters, I don't think I could see like, you know, a Green Goblin or a Rhino or an Electro or I just don't see them supporting their own movies or like their rogue gallery. Venom, obviously, I think they obviously went with that one. I think that was probably their best option. As far as building their own universe around, or like a Black Cat or something. But I mean, that whole universe is, I mean, it's very Spider-Man centric focused. And the other thing too, a lot of those characters have already been on the screen before.
Yes.
So yeah, I think they would have to reinvent the wheel a little bit. Like it's kind of nice for Marvel in a way. Like Marvel, obviously, they have so many characters they can exploit. Sounds like a bad word, but yeah, they just have so many options, avenues they can go in. And now that they even have the X-Men, like it's almost like, for me, like it's almost intimidating that they have the X-Men because they already have so much going on. And X-Men itself is like, that's a huge.
It's a ginormous roster of characters.
Yeah, so it's kind of like even incorporating those characters to the MCU. That's like a huge. That's like Marvel's already putting out 4 films a year essentially. I think coming out this. I think they're even doing like 5 in 2024. So they don't really have that many more movies they can put out a year, you know. But
see, that's where Kevin Feige would disagree with you, sir, because like he's like, man, like I can't imagine like the salivation that's happening on the Disney side of things in regards to that X-Men license, because
they've held off on it a long time, you know.
Yeah. But like you can have access to Magneto, Xavier, Wolverine, Cyclops, Storm, Jean Grey. Like there are just so many characters. That's even just the most popular ones. That's not
honestly
even
like X-Men,
Psylocke and Nightcrawler. Like
before the MCU, I definitely would say the X-Men were my favorite aspect of the Marvel universe. Like I just really love those characters. I think it's because I grew up with that X-Men show on Fox Kids. But then we played a lot of like those X-Men Legends games.
X-Men Legends, those games are so good.
Yeah. They released another one for the Switch. You should get that. We can play, Matt. I actually own that game.
I forget what's the name of that one. It's like a is it Avenger or something, or is it like Marvel?
I'll have to look it up. I can't remember.
Yeah,
It's something like, yeah, it's not just X-Men though. It's all like
yeah.
Marvel characters.
No, I remember you mentioning that. Yeah, I've only been hesitant on that because the online play on like every Switch game is complete dog meat. Like it's just so bad
Yeah.
because Nintendo doesn't know how the internet works in the year of our Lord 2021. But
Yeah.
but
Um,
uh but yeah, no, like the I mean, if we're going to compare licenses like apples to apples, I think that like you have an appropriate comparison between X-Men on the Disney side and Spider-Man, just Spider-Man, like licenses and characters on the Sony side. Like
see, I
they have
think,
a huge number of characters.
but I think X-Men, honestly, I think though they don't have quite the name recognition except for maybe Wolverine, I think there's so much more like you could do with those characters at this point than you could with the Spider-Man characters.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's because it's you're right in that like most of the Spider-Man characters have been on screen at some point within like the last 10 years. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's weird because it's so weird to think like the first Spider-Man came out, what, like I'm gonna say the year 2000. That was over 20 years ago.
Yeah, did the first Sam Raimi
I'll look it up real
Spider-Man
fast.
movie come out in the year 2000? Sure,
I'll
sure,
look.
please.
Well,
Please tell
it's
me that's not
almost,
the case.
it's almost has to be like almost 20 years.
I'm almost concerned of this number.
So I was close, 2002, so 19
Uh,
years ago.
that's not better. um,
Yeah.
but like, still though, yeah, like, I mean, okay, let's say when
Do
did
you want to know
the
something kind of gross though? I'm just like thinking. So when we were watching Spider-Man in 2002, like if kids are watching this Spider-Man today, like let's say they're gonna go to the theater and watch Spider-Man No Way Home this year in the year 2021, that would not be that different than like let's say Empire Strikes Back coming out. Like when we were watching the first Spider-Man, the Empire Strikes Back like came out like 20 years before that. I'm just thinking it's weird.
I hate you for that comparison. I'm insulted. I thought I felt old before. Now it's so much worse. That's the comparison you're giving me.
Or like the first Indiana Jones, you know?
Oh, god damn. Because okay, so here's the math I was trying to break down in my head. Okay, so Spider-Man 3 from the Sam Raimi films came out in 2007, which means we're looking at 14 years between when that movie came out initially to now.
15 years.
Yeah, well, 14, 15 years, depending on when you're rounding. So we're looking at, if we're going to count the villains that showed up in those movies, you have Venom, Sandman, Doc Ock, and Green Goblin. Right?
Oh wait, you're right. It's
Everyone.
14 years. Damn. Like, that's just still in my head. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But like, so if they're trying to avoid overlapping on characters, which they're clearly not, because we know Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Sandman, probably Venom. Yeah, just not like.
I think he might. I think he might show up maybe in the end credits, but I don't think he's actually going to be like in the main film.
No, I would agree. I think it would be too much if they tried to have Tom Holland and both of the other Spider-Man in addition to Venom in the same movie. So I would agree there. I think you'd probably show up in like more of like an after credits capacity.
That'd be my theory, but or thought, but who knows?
Yeah,
That
I
movie's gonna be
mean,
insane. Like there's gonna be so much in it.
I mean, that's what I worry about with Sony, man. Like Sony just has no chill in terms of like what they're gonna do with the characters. Because the fact that we're already getting a Carnage based film seems like it's too soon for me. Like I feel like largely like Venom's barely flushed out versus adding like another symbiote. Like, are they going to have a symbiote verse? Which, by all means, they could fucking have because that's how many symbiotes there are. There are a
Yeah.
lot of them, and so like,
Yeah.
there could be so many symbiote-based movies from Sony, and that bothers me. Like,
I do like the symbiotes. I kind of wish I hope they go with like the comic vibe of them though. I always kind of got like a weird like I can't the artwork is just so like 90s.
mhm.
And I loved it for that. Like they're like different symbiotes were really like they're all different colors. And some of them were
Yeah,
like really brightly colored. I
it was
remember
always it felt very like it felt very akin to like the lanterns of like DC. You had like your green lanterns, your yellow lanterns, your red
yeah.
lanterns. Like you had all these different versions of these different like the same base character, but like different versions of them.
Yeah. It's amazing how far we've gone into like the Marvel canon of characters. Like we're getting Hitmonkey shows. I even know who Hitmonkey was. Like Modoc's had his own show now. It's like these characters, everyone's getting their own thing, which is
Mhm.
kind of crazy when you think about it.
Oh man, I don't know if I told you. Minor side note. Uh, Speaking of Modoc, wife and I have watched a few. A few. We've watched like a pretty decent number of episodes of that show. We're not like in love with it, and like I can't exactly say why I don't like it that much. I guess, but I will say I do love Patton Oswalt, who does the voice of Modoc in that show. And we're going to get to go see him when he's in town here.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be next year, but
Yeah.
like,
I also tried to watch that show. I think I watched the first episode and I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. It just was too. It annoyed me. I'm like, okay, I'm done. That's so kind of annoying.
I mean, like I see where they're going with it. It just like I think in comparison to the other MCU stuff that's out there right now, that like an Adult Swim version of like a villain of Marvel just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of hope they make more shows like that, and they were gonna make more shows like that, and it was originally greenlit by Jeff Loeb, or I never know how to say his name, but and he ran the Marvel TV before it got absorbed basically into Marvel Studios. Um,
Okay.
and Jeff Loeb himself is like a really he's a prolific comic book writer. He wrote like a lot of famous Batman arcs, like The
Oh,
Long
okay.
Halloween and
Oh, okay. So
Hush.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's got some like comic
Yeah. I don't know what he's doing
background.
these days. Obviously, Marvel Television is now no longer a thing. Um, but
Hmm.
and I don't know why I got on that. But yeah, but those shows like Hitmonkey and Modoc were greenlit by him before. Those are like the last shows that are coming out before, like that's the last remnants of that era of Marvel Television. You saw it with like
Interesting.
Hailstrom as well. I think that came out on Hulu a while back. No one watched it. I didn't watch it. But they're gonna make like some more shows. They're like I think they're making a Howard the Duck show that was gonna be by Kevin Smith, I think. Um,
I feel like I vaguely remember hearing about that at some point.
yeah, but that got shut down when that change happened. Before we move on, I also since Patton Oswalt was brought up and this popped in my head because it kind of
Mhm.
usually celebrity deaths don't affect me that much, and I don't really like it doesn't really bug me. But I gotta admit, Norm MacDonald's death, like that was a big one
Yes.
for me. Like Norm was the only I've only ever seen a comedian twice live once, and Norm was at I saw him twice at the Helium Comedy Club in Portland,
Mhm.
and like I gotta say this, like it. He has a really good, like I felt like I knew him, like personally. I obviously didn't, but he just had like that sort of aura about him, where, like he felt like you like he was your friend. Um, and I remember
Mhm.
the first time I saw Norm, like on, I think the first time I ever saw him, because I'm not a big SNL guy. I didn't really grow up watching it like a lot of people did,
Sure.
but it was on the Comedy Central roast of Bob Saget. I don't know if you remember that, Matt.
Yes, I know exactly the rest you're talking about.
Yeah, and I just remember like him starting off like saying these incredibly terrible jokes, which apparently he got from like a 1940s like retirement joke book. And he just like starts off like talking, and like the crowd just does not get it. And I didn't get it either. I'm like, what is going on?
Meanwhile, the other comedians on stage are absolutely losing their minds
Yeah.
laughing. They're just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
But like Norm just kept going, like he didn't care about the audience reaction at all. And like there was just this twinkle in his eye as he
mhm.
continues to tell these awful, awful jokes. And I just remember like, something that's clicked in my head, and then it became like the one of the funniest things I'd ever seen. Like I was just like, laughing like so hard. And I think that's what Norm, like he really fed off that, like that initial confusion. Like he liked to get the audience sort of confused. Like that was his sweet spot, where like you didn't really know what the heck he was talking about. And
Mhm.
and then it clicked in your head. You're like, oh, this guy, like I get it. And it's like I can't even describe what he's doing, but I have never I've seen a few other comedians try to do it. I remember Andy Samberg did something similar on one of the roasts, where like he was just telling these terrible jokes and it was all about the delivery. But I know I'm rambling here, but I guess gotta say, like yeah, I really loved Norm MacDonald. I was really sad to see him go. Um
No,
he was one of the good ones.
he was an incredibly funny comedian. He was like I guess I won't say like completely original, but like he had a style all his own that like he just really could work a room exactly the way he wanted. And like, yeah, I had felt the same way when like I saw that he had passed. I was like, God, that is just so sad. Like he was such a treasure in terms of like how he approached comedy and just like how he did his deliveries. Like he just there aren't a lot of comedians like him, and there aren't going to be a lot of people like him either.
And I really respected him personally, because like
Mhm.
he just did not give I'll just say he didn't give a fuck. Like he like stood up for other comedians, and like he was never like, obviously he hosted man, I'm terrible, SNL stuff, like the talk show part of it, like
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about. I
Mhm.
mean, everyone that who would watch this is probably like, why don't you know what that is? But yeah, I know. I just never
The
really
opening
watched.
monologue, I'm assuming.
No, not it's like the Weekend Update, I think is what it was.
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure.
Um,
Mhm.
he obviously hosts that, so he's political on some level, but like he didn't get into like the whole like mumbo jumbo about like politics, and like just getting into like the political correctness, which I really love that about him. Like he didn't play that game, and I mean, there's so few people that are brave enough to do that these days,
Mhm.
and I respect him a lot for that. So, and he was just funny. Like, I'm sure you saw that Conan sketch where like I think it was like this woman came on and she was starring in a movie with Carrot Top. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
Oh yeah, no, it's so funny. It's like at the end of it, and the whole thing is hilarious. But at the end of it, it's like, oh, so Conan's like, so what is the name of the movie that you're gonna star in Carrot Top with? To this lady, and Norma's like, he already had an interview earlier, so he's kind of sitting on the couch to the side, right, like just like commenting on everything.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, it's gonna be chairman of the board.
Mhm.
And Conan like looks at Norm because he's been like making fun of her the entire time. Essentially, he's like, make something of that, you freak. And then Norm was like, because he was like playing it, like he's like throwing in it to like see what he's gonna do with it, and like, and since it's a movie starring Carrot Top, he's like more like chairman of the BORED. I just Yeah.
Just in his deadpan delivery, that sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. He was
Uh,
great, like on talk shows that, and man, I'm just ramming off on him, but like, if you ever seen like when David Letterman,
mhm,
it was his last show, and he had Norm Macdonald on there, because
mhm,
essentially David Letterman, like, he stuck his neck out for Norm and like put him on a show, and he's a young
mhm.
comic, and Norm was just like breaking down, crying at the end of it. I'm like, man, this guy's great. I love this guy Norm so
Mm.
much. So sorry, that's all more I'll say about Norm Macdonald.
Oh, like I love that tangent. That's great because like I think it's like comedians like Norm Macdonald are the types of guys that like I want to like be put more down in history in terms of their influence on the genre, right? Like I don't know. I put Norm like up there with like your Mitch Hedbergs in terms of like clearly Norm had a much longer career than like Hedberg ever did. RIP, but like regardless, like their influences on the genre were huge. Like modern uber successful comedians looked up to people like Mitch Hedberg and Norm Macdonald
Yeah.
for why they did what they did and
Well, and like
how they did what they
and
did.
Norm was like a comedian's comedian. Like, I don't really like that term. It sounds kind of, I don't know, like a
No,
platitude or something.
I think
Yeah.
that's a perfectly appropriate way to describe him.
But like,
Like,
yeah, because he was on SNL obviously, and he did some like I'm sure you've seen like the Burt Reynolds one where he, like Turd Ferguson,
hmm,
and but he when he was on Weekend Update, when he did that, like he just tore into OJ Simpson, like every single like, yeah, it was, he didn't, like I said, he didn't give a fuck. He just like went after OJ Simpson, like at a time that it really wasn't like, this is a new
PC.
term, like, yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't like something that you should do. And apparently one of the like guys like high up in, who ran SNL, was like a friend of OJ, and so that's
Mhm.
why he got fired from SNL.
No, I
And
don't
it's,
know that.
and the thing
Shit.
about Norm was like he would, I mean, he's well known by a certain group of people, like comedians all love him, and like there's people like us that obviously love Norm Macdonald, but he is not like a household name
No.
like a lot of SNL alumni are, like, well, I could just name off like five on my, like, let's say Will Ferrell,
Will
uh
Ferrell,
um
Sandy Sandberg,
yeah, I
right?
mean, it's endless. It's almost, how many comedians have been on SNL and like household name, there's
Mhm.
so many. And he didn't really get that, which in its own way, like, I mean, I don't know if I don't know. Well,
Mhm.
he's just a interesting man, and I gonna miss Norm.
No,
He's
I think
hilarious in
that's
person too.
well, geez, if he was, what was he, 61? Is
Yeah,
that
he
how
wasn't
old?
even that old. Yeah, he had like
Yeah,
a
like
9-year battle with cancer.
I didn't know that. God, that's terrible. Yeah, like that's just clearly a talent gone long before like he was due. Like, yeah, I think Norm Macdonald was one of the like I don't know, like in that we're talking about him, like Patton Oswalt, I feel like is like another one of these like comedian, you know, the type of character that like knows the type of humor that comedians go in on. Like I feel like if I'm going to mutter four comedians off the top of my head, like Mitch Hedberg, Norm Macdonald, Patton Oswalt, and Bill Burr.
Yeah,
Like,
for me, definitely Bill Burr, definitely Dave Chappelle.
yeah, Dave
Um,
Chappelle, that's not a great one.
yeah, Norm Macdonald, and there's another one I saw live. Man, I cannot remember. It was like a big deal for me when I came out here that I actually got to see these people live. Like, I was just super excited to see Dave Chappelle live, super excited to see Norm Macdonald live, super excited to see
Mhm.
Bill Burr live. And man, there's another one that was like a big deal for me that I'm drawing a blank on. But yeah, just like those guys. I was just gonna say, because like, I is it okay if I? Oops, what am I doing? So Norm wrote a book not even that long ago. In the final
Mhm.
chapter, I was just gonna see if you're okay with me reading it. It's not too long.
Yeah, please, by all means.
Okay. This is by Norm, and like, I guess apparently I haven't read this book all the way through, obviously, but apparently this book, like, it's kind of hard to tell when he's lying and when he's not lying, which is sort
Okay.
of like perfect for him because
Hmm.
that's the way he was. Like, I found this pretty profound in its own little way. So, all right, here we go. There's the way things are, and then the way things appear. And it is the way things appear, even when false, that is often the truest. If I'm remembered, it will always be by the 4 years I spent at Saturday Night Live, and maybe even more than that, by the events surrounding my departure from that show. As long as SNL exists, then so do I. When people come to see me do stand up, it is because somewhere in their memory I live on SNL, dressed as a young Burt Reynolds, insisting Alex Trebek refer to me as Turd Ferguson. And they come to see me, and I'm old and fat, and I don't mention SNL, and I do my answering machine joke, and they're happily disappointed. After the show, they stand beside me and take pictures, the way you would with a donkey at the side of a road. They tell me that they are big fans and that they don't care what their girlfriends say. They understand me even though they know good and well that nobody else does. I'm dry, they say. The next time I come to their town, they don't show up.
Mhm.
Uh, let's see. It can be difficult to define yourself by something that happened so long ago and is gone forever. It's like a fellow at the end of the bar telling no one in particular about the silver medal he won in high school track, the one he still wears around his neck. The only thing an old man can tell a young man is that it goes fast, real fast, and if you're not careful, it's too late. Of course, the young man will never understand this truth. But looking back now, I can see that my life since SNL has been a full sprint, trying with all my might to outrun the wolves of irrelevancy snapping at my heels. It has all been in vain, of course. They caught and devoured me years ago, but not completely. Lauren would see to that. Uh, Obviously, the guy behind SNL. Uh, my foot would still make a vague imprint. Myself would still cast a faint shadow. And years later, I would write a book, and not only write it, but be in it as well. I think a lot of people feel sorry for you if you are on SNL and emerge from the show anything less than a superstar. They assume you must be bitter, but it is impossible for me to be bitter. I've been lucky. If I had to sum up my whole life, I guess those are the words I would choose. All right. When I was a boy, I was sure I'd never make it past Moose Creek, Ontario, Canada. But I've been all over the world, except for Europe, Asia, Australia, Africa, and South America. Oh, and Antarctica. But that's really splitting hairs. I mean, how many people have been to Antarctica? I never expected to be any more than a common laborer, and I would have considered myself lucky to have achieved that, but I was blessed with so much more. I'm a stand-up comedian and have been for over a quarter of a century. I performed thousands of hours from small club in Ottawa, Ontario, all the way to a small club in Edmonton, Alberta. Sometimes I get big laughs and I think I'm the best stand-up in the whole world, and other times I bomb and I think I'm not even, it's almost over, in the top 5. Before I was famous, I had a whole bunch of jobs where all I needed was boots. People would look right past me, or if they did look at me, it was with a mean look. But when I got famous, people would look at me and smile. I wondered where they knew me from. If they flat out recognized me, they'd laugh and dance like they'd won a prize, and I'd just stand there and smile and feel warmth from their love. So the fame made the world, which is a real cold place, a little less cold. As for my gambling, it's true. I lost it all a few times, but that's because I always took the long shot and it never came in. But I still have some time before I cross that river. And if you're at this table and you're rolling them bones, then there's no money in playing it safe. You have to take all your chips and put them on double six and watch as every eye goes to you, and then to those red dice doing their wild dance and freezing time before finding the cruel green felt. I've been lucky. And that's that.
Ah. Well, fine. I'll buy the book. Damn.
I mean, I don't know. That was probably too much. But I thought there's a few profound moments in there, and like you could kind of tell that he knew he was dying. So
yeah, like that was a man on like the end of his life who knew full well that like I need to say my piece before I'm gone. And like to that, all of that speaks full well of like the type of person that Norm MacDonald was, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like I think it stands to reason that like a lot of probably comedians probably feel that way to some degree. Like I was a hardcore follower of stand-up for a long time. Honestly, it probably all happened really before I was married, but like not that my marriage was any indicator of like when that era ended. It was mostly that coincidentally, a lot of the people that I loved in terms of comedy turned out more to be monsters than I was
Like
previously aware of.
Louis C.K. something like that.
Yeah, Louis C.K. and like I don't know, like he was like a big favorite of mine when I was younger.
Yeah.
Um,
For whatever
like
reason, I never really cared for him. But
sure,
and
oh no,
yeah, I
man.
don't know. I even watched his HBO show, and I just
Mhm.
never really liked him.
Man, I was a big fan of Louis C.K. and then
Then again, I did like
like
Bill Cosby for what it's worth. So
yeah, like that was a comedian. I had meant to delve into like small tangent or large tangent turned short. I got a hard drive from my brother that was just like chock full. It was like a terabyte drive full of media. It was music and comedy and like self-help tapes. And amongst all of this comedy was a ton of Bill Cosby. And for years before any of this all like came to surface, I was like, man, I really need to like take the time and just like listen to this Bill Cosby stuff. Like, because my exposure as a like born in the early 90s kid
Nick at Night.
was was like the Cosby show. That
I
was
know
like
Nick at
my
Night. Yeah, that's how I saw it too.
yeah, that was like my full exposure to Bill Cosby. And so I was like,
And also,
I don't
for me, like, I don't know if you remember this or if you saw it, but there was like kids say the darndest things.
yeah,
That was
kids,
on
yeah.
Nick at Night too. I love that show. I like that.
100%. And I was like, man, I really need to like take the time and listen to this. And then like I shit you not, like probably like 6 months before all this started going down, I was like, man, like I'd really been thinking about it. And I was like, maybe I should like finally like sit down and make this happen. And like during that time, all of this started to unfold. And I was like,
About the Jello.
my window has closed. It's gone. It's done. It's over. Like, but yeah, no, like I love that we're going in this comedy tangent. That's amazing. No, like I don't know. Like
Yeah, I
there
like this
were
too. It is fun to talk about this kind of stuff because it for our generation, I think in particular, especially people that grew up. For me, watching Comedy Central in the summer times, just watching a ton of stand-up comedy during the daytime. Like I loved it. Like I watched hours of it. And
yeah,
like it really, I think, informed probably my sense of humor probably more than I realized.
sure. Oh yeah.
And I think for this generation, that's probably not like it. I'm not saying comedy's probably stand-up comedy's huge for them, but it's not watching Comedy Central during the day. It's watching Netflix and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. Yeah, I mean I've tickets to go see Patton Oswalt next year, like early next year when he comes out. And then here in the near future, like I'm gonna be seeing Fortune Feimster like in like the next 2 weeks. You would know her from uh Mindy Project would probably be like the thing that you would know her from.
Never seen it, but
Um it has
I mean, I know of it. I know it has like Mindy
yeah, like
Kaling from
yeah,
like
Mindy Kaling from The Office, like she's the main actress. And I haven't personally watched a lot of it myself. My wife has. She loved the show. And then like in my experience to Fortune Feimster um was through like a Netflix comedy special that was like um it was like a highlight on several different comedians over the course of each episode. And Fortune was one of the comedians in one of these episodes, and it's just like her talking about like her life, and her experiences, as many comedians do. But she's super funny. Like she just has a style all of her own, and I feel like it really like feeds into her acting and watching her in like the Mindy Project. And like I don't know, like I just really loved her style. Like she She was really bold. She told her story the way that she experienced it. Like, it's like, I'm a lesbian. I'm fat. I don't give a fuck. And like, I just really love that energy. Like, that's just this lady living her life, you know? Like, I just spent the evening with a couple that like eloped just out of the blue. Like they've been together for 4 years and decided to tie the knot. And I was like, yeah, fuck it. Like, I'm so glad I'm getting to experience this like part of their life, like even for like a brief moment. You know, that's really dope that like even for just an evening, I get to be part of that glow of their life of we're married now. It's like I've been married for a while and like not a long time, 3 years, but like that's super cool. And like so just like that type of experience of I'm really looking forward to seeing Fortune Feimster for the same reasons of like I get to see this lady just do her thing and talk her and speak her truth on stage. It's gonna be super dope.
It is really bugging me. I know there's another comedian that I saw, and I think I'm just gonna wake up in the middle of the night like screaming their name because it's like really bugging me.
When you start screaming their name, he or she, just text that name to me because I need to know. In that moment, do it. I dare you.
Yeah.
Tell me immediately. I don't care what fucking time it
Well, I
is.
mean, Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle were huge for me. Like those were huge ones to see live.
Yeah.
Because Dave Chappelle is like amazing. Like
the fact you've seen both of them live just makes me so upset because I would kill to get Chappelle.
Oh, I'm surprised you haven't seen Bill Burr live.
I wanted to so badly. God damn, like so many of the comedians. Oh shoot, what is oh my god, okay. This is another brief internet.
Bill Burr, like from what I saw too, he's like a class act. Like
he's like Titus.
Yeah, Bill Burr, like he was like standing out. I mean, he was just like standing out in the lobby. This is in Portland, Oregon, at the Arlene Schnitzer. He's like standing out in the lobby, like you could walk up to him. Like I kind of regret not doing it. Like I would have. This is pre-COVID days, obviously, but that would have been something to like actually meet Bill Burr, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like I remember so clearly. I had watched Christopher Titus as a stand-up by means of Comedy Central for like probably like years. I'd watched a couple of his specials multiple times because of how funny he was. And then one day, living in Bozeman, Montana, he has a show in Bozeman, and then he's eating at the restaurant that I work at. And so like him and his wife, I think then girlfriend, are like at a table in the restaurant I'm working at. I'm just like,
wow,
this is killing me that I can't like go out and just be like, hi, I love you both like so much. Like, is this the craziest thing?
I mean, I'm sure I've told you the story, but the time I met Will Wheaton.
Yeah, the time you met Will Wheaton. I know.
Yeah, that was, but actually that's like looking at it now, because like I'll just tell the story, I guess, initially here. It's not that long, but I was in Cactus Records in Bozeman, which, as an aside, and this isn't one I wanted to get into, but that's leaving the main street. Did you know that?
Leaving Main Street? Where are they going?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, but they can't afford it anymore or something. Anyway, so yeah, I was in there with my grandma, and I remember I was like walking. I was by the incense spot. I don't know if you remember. There was a wall of like incense.
Oh yeah, no, I remember clearly.
Yeah, and I was like walking over there, and then like I saw this man. He was like just standing there. I don't remember what he was doing exactly, but I'm like, wait, that's Will Wheaton. Like,
just like out of the blue.
Well, I didn't say it, but like, you know, in my head, like it almost like didn't register. I'm like, wait, okay, what?
You're like, wait a
minute. That's Will Wheaton.
Definitely Will Wheaton, right?
And then like I kind of like walked away. I was like, was that really Will Wheaton? Like, it couldn't be. Like, there's no way. Like I was just walking to Will Wheaton.
It's not.
Like Cactus Records in Bozeman, Montana. And like at that time, like I was really into Big Bang Theory. I think a lot of people were, and he was big on that show. then obviously Will Wheaton's done a lot besides just Big Bang Theory. But
Sure, but
anyway, so yeah, I was with my grandma. I'm like, oh my God, Grandma, I think that might have been Will Wheaton. She's like, I don't know who that is. I don't remember what she said. She's like,
I don't know who that is.
but I walked up to the counter and like he was, he was talking to the cash register person, or the cashier. She wasn't talking to the cash register. And it's like at that point I'm like, okay, this guy's Will Wheaton, because just the way they were interacting, like, okay, that's definitely Will Wheaton. So
yeah,
I did get like a picture with him, and I was kind of doing the hover hand thing, I think. But yeah, it was. I just remember that was like just a weird, bizarre experience. It's just like you were like, it's like I don't know the words for it, but you're just like walking, like, oh, what? Like that's Will Wheaton.
yeah.
Like I didn't know. It's just it's like not what you're expecting, right? It's like you're walking into your TV or something. Yeah, it's a very strange experience. I think his brother lives in Bozeman or something. I don't know.
Oh, that's cool though.
At least he did at the time, and this was like years ago now, 10 years ago or something.
Yeah, it's crazy to me how much time has passed. Ugh. Yeah, I know. My claim to fame in terms of like celebrities is so lame in comparison to even to like where you've been. Like you've been in the same fucking room as Will Wheaton, like on in a casual context.
Like, yeah, but it was very, very casual.
Yeah, but like you still were like sharing space. I mean, I guess to be fair, yeah, like I did technically serve pizza to fucking Christopher Titus, but like in terms of actually meeting like the celebrity in person, it was like it's always political people with me. Like I've met John McCain and Max Baucus, and it's like these are people that
I think I met Max Baucus.
Max Baucus.
If you're watching this and you have no idea who Max Baucus is, clearly he was a senator from Montana, a Democratic senator from Montana. He's no longer a senator from Montana. I don't even know if he lives in Montana anymore. But I did meet Max Baucus as well. I believe it was like in downtown Billings. It's like some sort of like art fair or something, and there he was. And I was like, oh, there's Max Baucus. I met Judy Martz. She was the governor of Montana. He was at the CM Russell art show in Great Falls. At least I saw her.
I met Max Baucus, and I was in the presence of John McCain during budget week in DC, like during the what is it called? Like the flower festival that happens in DC.
The Cherry Blossom Festival?
Yeah, the Cherry Blossom Festival. And like that would have had to have been like probably like 2008, I think. Yeah, I think 2008, 2007. But like, yeah, like I was hanging out with a couple of like not representatives, but like assistants to representatives for both Max and for Reberg at the time. We're just like chilling in the Senate, like we're chilling in the area like outside the Senate, and I'm like, yeah, fucking John McCain, and like, and they're like, that's John McCain.
Is Johnny Boy?
I know Johnny. Like, for me at the time, like as like just a nervous high school student, like meeting John McCain was such a big
Can you imagine? Oh my God, it's John McCain.
I know.
You're like, oh.
In retrospect, I wish I had just like shook the man's hand. Damn, like
butterflies. Oh.
But
I don't like any politicians. I would go out of my way not to meet a politician, probably.
I mean, I would go out of my way to meet a politician only for the sake of like one, either confirming or deconfirming how I feel about them, just like on an emotional level versus like an actual.
Yeah. Why am I getting like man, John McCain, man. Whew.
Man, what a fucking built like a brick shit house. I would go at that.
This is gonna be, so for me, my big thing that like I you will have no idea who these people are, but they have a UFO festival here in McMinnville, and
Okay.
like a few years ago, it was 2019. It was in
Mhm.
May. Like I went there, and they have like a what do they call it? Like a Q&A session with all the guests there, and we
Sure.
were like talking like we had like David Paulides from like Missing 411. We had Bob Lazar, Bob freaking Lazar, like Area 51 fame.
Yeah.
We had George Knapp. We had like Jeremy Corbell. We had like that David Fravor guy. Man, it was a stacked house. And like I was walking around with these people. Like I walked by David Paulides, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Because for someone that's like into like that kind of stuff, like I've listened to these people. And like back in the day when I was like a young little tyke, I'd wake up in the morning, run upstairs, and I'd put on sightings on this show on I think it was a sci-fi channel.
Mhm.
Anyways, like, like a show that just had like a bunch of like, oh, here's ghosts, spooky, scary, alien. And like they had a big special on like Bob Lazar. And like I still
Mhm.
remember that. Like it's just a huge, huge deal for me. They were gonna have Whitley Strieber did like in 2020, but obviously that didn't happen. But yeah.
This makes me think of all of our numerous Nick and I have been friends for years now, and so like we would spend I spent the night at Nick's house
Are you gonna say coast to coast
constantly
AM?
as yeah, coast to coast AM. So
Yeah.
that we went to sleep, like that was like our midnight lullaby was coast to coast AM, which is like
Mm.
be on for like an hour or two before we like finally went to sleep.
Yeah, you would have probably heard Art Bell because I think he was on the weekends at
Mm,
that point. And
yeah.
Art Bell was the man. I'm sad that he died as well. That was a few years ago at this point.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, I remember because Matt Drudge with the Drudge Report, he had like a big thing on his website for Art Bell because obviously they were contemporaries because Matt Drudge also had a talk show, radio talk
Mhm.
show. I think it was on Sunday evenings. Yeah, like when I was growing up, like I was a big I loved listening to the radio, so it really I think affected me more than I'm willing to admit. But yeah, I listened to a lot of radio growing up,
Mhm. Oh
talk
man,
radio.
I love this bizarre tangent we've
I
got
know
on. I feel
we're way off Marvel. It all started with good old Norm MacDonald, man. Like,
I
yeah,
know.
it actually started with
I
Patton
mean,
Oswalt. But
yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think that speaks to I don't know, kind of the legend that Norm MacDonald was. You know, he was he was something special. You know, and like definitely far cut off way before his time. Like we could have gotten so much more enjoyment out of Norm Macdonald and his just his unique style
yeah,
and just comedy and in life and his musings. And it's really too bad that he's gone now. And
yeah,
I just
and he was a strong voice of like of just I don't want to say centrist. He just he just was calm. He didn't get into the whole political stuff. Like he wasn't
mhm,
he wasn't left, he wasn't right. He just like called it as he saw it, which again,
mhm.
I mean, he probably had his own politics. And if I was gonna guess, I'd probably say
Sure.
he was probably, well, he was Canadian, so I don't he's probably wasn't a Democrat or Republican, but he's probably left leaning. But
Mhm,
he just didn't get involved with it. And he called like
mhm,
both the left and the right out. I mean, and I think he focused a lot on the left in some ways because I think that I mean, I think he was left leaning. I just think he saw it as like something that needed to be called out, which I appreciate that
mhm.
about him. Like I'm glad that like he just didn't give a like I said, he didn't give a fuck. Like I was like
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like he called it as he saw it, and like regardless of his political leanings, it was just like that was the thing that
Yeah.
he spoke his truth whenever it suited him because fuck anyone else who disagreed, you know?
Yeah. I really liked David Spade's or like his Twitter post he put about like kind of honoring his friend's death. And it was just like a picture of him and Norm as young men, like sitting on this bench, and like David Spade has like a bottle of beer like in his hand between his legs, and Norm's just like he looks like he's high or something, but he's like Normie, one of the last comics who just didn't give a fuck. So I guess I've been quoting David Spade this entire time, but I just really yeah, I just like that about him. Yeah, he didn't care, man. Yeah.
No, and I think that like we need like I guess I would say we need specifically comedians like that
Yeah.
because
Mm.
like I don't know, like you have comedians who lean really hard one way or the other. Like going from my own personal experience, like Louis C.K. was always a comedian that leaned really far left, you know, and then if you're looking on the other side of the spectrum, like you had your blues collar comedy tour folks, you know, your Bill Engvalls, your Ron Whites,
I
like
don't even know if Ron White is conservative. I have no idea. I'm certain Larry the Cable Guy is, and Jeff Foxworthy are.
for sure, right? But like that was like, but those were still like I listened to like that full spectrum of like the full blues collar comedy tour folks like
Yeah.
multiple times over
Yeah, me too.
multiple tours.
I love those
But
specials.
then but yeah, 100%. Like, but then I still was listening to folks like, you know, Christopher Titus and Louis C.K. and Patton Oswalt. Like Patton Oswalt, like by comparison to like the blues collar folks, is like a Shiite liberal. Like it's you know, like that was a huge
Yeah.
part of my
I mean,
upbringing and yours too, you know,
yeah,
like
and if you look at even comedians today, like you have like liberals like Bill Maher, who
mhm,
like he is like he's called out liberals a lot recently,
mhm,
which is kind of interesting. I mean, he is, I would say, more of a, what's the word for it? He calls it out where he needs to call it out. Like he obviously has his own beliefs about something, about these things, and I don't agree with it, whatever everything he believes in, but like I
sure.
respect that he will call out his own, his own people. So
Yeah, no, and you need people on the like the political spectrum, like comedian or otherwise,
mhm.
to be speaking like that
Well, I
because
was I was gonna go deep here too. I just because like you look at the Bible,
mhm,
and you have like prophets, and the prophets were like a very
mhm,
particular like sort of people in like Israel. Like they would call out the ruling authorities and be, well, obviously, in biblical lingo, they'd be like, a fire of will rain down upon this kingdom because everyone's not following God's word. It would be
yeah,
like that, but in a way, it's kind of a similar sort of thing. Like like the like bards or the court jesters back in
mhm,
like in Europe, like they had a very specific role. Like they could kind of call out the king when no one else could.
sure,
And I think comedians these days, like, and
kind
that's
of,
actually kind of a scary thing about the whole cancel culture we have going on now. But like they have a very specific role to play, I think, in our culture, like to
mhm,
point out. Like you look at someone like George Carlin,
sure.
or man, I'm trying to, man, people, if they knew the names I'm drawing a blank on, they would like hate me. 'Cause, like, I'm like,
Yeah,
there's like
sure.
these really famous comedians. I'm like, why can't I think of their name right now?
Mhm,
But like, yeah, there's just these comedians. They play such an important role in our culture of like calling out like social norms and making us question why we do the things that we do. And I think that's a really important part of our society that, I mean, that we need to support. Um,
mhm.
that kind of like free thinking sort of aspect of what they do, and you don't really connect it like making someone laugh, like that's a huge, like, you're not, a lot of times you're not going to win over someone's argument with like pure logic, but if you're making them laugh, like at least even if you don't agree with everything they're saying, like there's still some sort of like
You make it more relatable.
communal thing that's happening where like a bunch of people that don't agree are still like enjoying the same thing at that moment, so
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like I don't necessarily know of like you know like court jesters necessarily like an apropos comparison, but like I think the way you put it like biblically in terms of you know like Pharisees and such like that I think that seems like an appropriate comparison of like their they're polite they're providing political commentary or at least commentary on what's happening culturally at the time And the only difference, like biblically versus modern times, is that there's so many more voices to be paying attention to, right?
Yeah, because of technology and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like I think that yeah, I think that's it's a hugely valuable tool I think we need socially for people to be for people like no matter how devout and serious you consider your convictions on a particular topic, to be able to examine it from a humorous point of view from the other perspective, I think is really important, because then that really truly feeds into like, well, okay, I believe this, but I also understand how ridiculous some of my convictions can be from this perspective. Right. It's really important to have that, because like it's the difference between Transformers 1 and 2. In Transformers 1, they knew full well, it was like, this is a movie about giant robots, you see? Like, whereas like Transformers 2 is like, we have no idea what we're doing. And so like
Yeah, that was
it ended up taking
that
itself
movie.
too
I think
seriously.
the writer's strike was going on when that movie was getting filmed, and so they literally started. Made that movie without a script.
Oh yeah, no, they wrote
Which
the
is
script as it went on.
yeah.
No, maybe not the best comparison,
I
but
see what
like,
you're saying, but yeah,
but
I
yeah,
just like
yeah, like
the
the
story
point still
behind that film.
stands. But yeah, like I just think comedians are so important to like just to media and to like the social discourse that happens. And without them, I think we would be in a much rougher place than we are currently.
Yeah.
So
And I think a lot of that, there's, and not to get too political here, but I think there's a lot of comedians that are coming out and being like, yeah, this cancel culture is going too far. Like I can't even go on a college campus. Like I know Jerry Seinfeld's called out that kind of stuff. We can't even go on a college campus without getting without being terrified that we're gonna get booed, for saying something that isn't appropriate. And I think that's a problem for both the left and the right now. Again, I don't want to get too political here, but I think everyone's just taking themselves so damn seriously right now. And historically, I don't know if I was gonna say this in general. Like I feel like it's been the right that has been the really serious people, like we're serious people. And I think that's infected the left now too. Everyone's just like so serious about like, this is what if you don't say like that, you don't talk about that. We don't talk that. You don't talk about that. And
it's not a matter of being able to like casually joke about it ever. It's a matter of I'm serious all the time, forever. Forget about joking about it.
And I would even argue in my own fashion, like I think that attitude that is sort of happened with a lot of the younger people in our generation.
Yeah.
I think that almost led in part, not entirely, to the rise of like the far right and the alt-right, and specifically forums like the Donald and like these kind of like all these troll videos that are on YouTube of for Donald Trump, just like trying to piss people off, essentially, is what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going on. It's like people are just taking themselves so seriously these days that it makes a certain set of people like want to make them angry. And I think specifically with Donald Trump, and I know for a fact with that forum, the Donald, that was all about just making people angry. And that's a lot of them, that was the only reason why they voted for him, was because they wanted to make people angry. So,
no, for sure. I would totally agree.
And I think it's a dangerous spot to be in our country actually right now, both for the left and the right. Like if we're so dug in, then we can't even find any sort of like common ground anymore.
Yeah.
And we can't even talk about certain subjects. We need comedians for that. Yeah, like I mean, it is something that I think should be considered. So
no,
and people are.
Agree.
I mean, obviously I'm not like the only one thinking these things. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, I mean, oof, I went off the deep end there.
No. I hate to interrupt here, but I have to pee so bad. So I'm gonna be right back.
Give me 1 second. 1 second before you go. I'm just gonna pause it. We're back from a bathroom break, and so we're just gonna finish this baby up. I'm gonna ask Matt a real quick question, and then we're gonna call it a night.
Yes.
So Matt, just to finish us
Mhm.
off, what have comedians meant to you in your life and growing up? And I guess as I guess the more focus it even down a little bit, if you want to go there,
Mhm.
which comedians particularly have meant the most to you, do you think?
Oh man, like comedy, comedy was such a it was a hardcore following of mine for a long time. Especially like there was at some point like after sophomore year of high school that like I really started diving in more into comedy, and like especially in college where like every day um like I worked a prep job at a restaurant. I'd be listening to comedians during that time. Like on my way to work, I'd be listening to comedians. Like Pandora was like my source of comedy for a long time. There's like a random list of comedians telling their stories to me. And like so much of that formed my sense of humor and how I look at the world. Like I think for a lot of people, like myself and others included, is that like humor is the lens in which you try and look at the world, because with the removal of that lens of humor, everything can feel so awful.
Yeah,
But
I would
like,
also go. I don't know.
mhm,
It's going to be a really high level comment, and I don't necessarily expect a response, but
hmm,
it's just something that kind of popped into my head while you were talking, and I don't want to take too long even talking about it. But I think
sure.
humor is just it's fascinating that it's such a part of what makes humans humans, and
Mhm,
that like we even evolved laughter at all. Like it's in a way it's like so interesting that's a thing.
mhm,
And I mean, every culture knows what humor is. Like everyone knows what humor is. Everyone's laughed. Everyone's like been tickled, funny, and emitted like a laughter out of their mouth. It's like just a natural thing to do. And like babies, I don't have a baby, but like I assume they laugh before they even learn how to talk.
mhm.
So
Oh,
I
for
mean,
sure. Yeah.
it's just fascinating. I wonder if it has something to do with like the theory of minds, in that like humans, I think, though I don't know if we're like unique in this ability, I think we have a far more advanced ability to put ourselves outside of our own body in a way. Like we can see like
Mhm,
from a vantage point how our own selves interact with everything else,
mhm,
as opposed to like an animal that, and I don't want to say this universally because it's probably not true, but a dog does dog things and
mhm.
doesn't criticize why he's doing dog things, but
Sure.
a human will do human things and criticize and constantly like, why am I doing this? Like I don't even want to
Mhm.
be a human. Like that's how I
Yeah.
am like half the time. Like why I don't even want to be a human. I don't want to walk on 2 feet. Like I just want to like I just it's weird. Like sometimes I look at a human and
Mhm.
I'm like, you're just like an ironed out animal.
Yeah.
Like
Iron
it's like someone's
down.
like an iron is like, oh, let's take an antler and like iron it
Let's
out and
take
make
out
it
all the like
2 feet.
primordial aspects of
Yeah.
you and
And I think
to
humor goes back to that like idea that it's like pointing out the absurdity of the life that we're living.
Mhm.
And I think that's a human, it's almost like God gave us this ability to laugh at it, because if we weren't laughing, we'd be crying, because it's
Mhm.
just so absurd and so obscenely like difficult, and like if we weren't laughing at all this and like analyzing it and like figuring it out, like we would just like not have a way to physically deal with it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Oh, man.
anyway.
No, I mean this is such a, you do this to me every time we talk on this goddamn podcast. I feel like I could go on for a long time with this topic, because like people build defense mechanisms for themselves, like just to deal with being people. And I think like a big and like really robust way of doing that is with humor. Like like it has gotten to the point of being a trope of like people deal with trauma by means of humor or by being
Mhm.
sarcastic or by laughing about it. Like I'm one of those people. Like
Yeah,
I self-deprecate to the point of like to where
yeah.
it's not funny anymore.
What is it
And
called?
like
Is it hang? Hangman's humor. It's something like that, like dark humor, but it's like gallows humor.
Yeah. Yeah,
Gallows
Gallus
humor.
humor.
Gallows
Yeah,
humor, Nick. It's a but I know
like
like
it.
the Vikings that they were
Mhm,
infamous for having this gallows humor going into battle
mhm,
and just like laughing even in the
mhm.
face of death, you know, and
Yeah,
that's
and like
awesome, you know. I love
it's
that.
like people apply that same kind of humor to just like going to their fucking jobs, but like that's one thing about the state of how jobs are now. But like
Yeah.
it's just like that's how people just
Mm,
handle being people, you know? And that's why I think that like out of a lot of media that's presented to us, like I think a lot of TV shows, movies, like music, even etc., are like kind of the like opiates of the masses in a certain way, to borrow a phrase from a you know
Karl Marx.
yeah, from a borderline dictatorship in China at the time. But like but comedians are like a light shining through in the dark in a way, and that like you need to be able to laugh even at your deepest convictions at some point, because if you take them too seriously, then you cut yourself off from the ability to examine them more closely. And like there's no better outlet for that than like a group of people whose job it is to literally
Mm,
tell you a joke about what you feel most strongly about.
yeah. I want like and this again, I'm going off on a this is on the same track, but
Hmm.
I do like I do think that, you know, 2020 was such an awful year in so many ways, and I'm not even gonna list off what we all know why it was awful in America. You know, we're both Americans, we know.
Yeah.
Like if you're outside America, like it's probably a little bit different than you, but especially with the racial tension in the election and everything. But
Hmm.
I just feel like we just as a culture we're losing our humor. Like we're just not laughing as much. We're
Hmm.
not enjoying life. Everything is so serious, and I just wonder if it's not having an effect on people more than we recognize. Like it's just kind of, you know, it's like I miss just being able to go out and like just enjoy life and not having to worry about, you know, getting sick, you know. And I know a lot of people take that a little bit differently. Like I'm for me, like I'm not huge. I don't really worry that much about getting sick anymore. You know, I mean, I have been vaccinated, so it's, you know, but it's I miss that. I miss that sort of lightheartedness when you're in a crowd and you can just enjoy it and not have to worry about politics and death essentially. And yeah, I do think it's something that we're facing as a side, and I haven't really thought about it until now. So thank you, Matt, and honestly, thank you, Norm MacDonald, because that's what set us off on this track. too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No, like I'm glad that we could go on a tangent like this, because like I think that like in a way the things that we talk about like on a week to week basis regarding like just it's in the name, nerds of the north. Like we talk about nerdy shit on a week to week basis, and like the stuff we talk about definitely feeds into the like the opiates of the masses, like I was talking about. Like there are things that people watch that don't necessarily make them like think too hard or to dwell on things that are happening in their real life. It allows them to escape the reality that they're in, and like even if for a moment you're like worrying about a different reality than your own, you're being given a small release
yeah. And I
from
think,
what you actually worry about.
and I do think a good distinction between most comedians and most of the other stuff you see on TV,
Hmm.
um, is that most of that stuff is produced by massive corporations. And
Hmm.
like if you watch stand up, like a
Yeah,
lot of that is just some like asshole riffing on life, and it's not like corporation approved. I mean, I
yep.
think like
There's no
that's a
board of directors. Like,
yeah, like I think that's a huge thing too, and that's another thing too. I mean, if you look at people like some of the stuff that I remember when Dave Chappelle's special came out like on Netflix, and people were just so offended. And I can't remember when that was, a few years ago now, but
hmm
I remember like people wanted to take it off Netflix because they were so offended by it. I should watch it again because I remember liking it. But
Mhm.
yeah, I just think it's kind of scary to think that comedians are so afraid these days to be able to just riff on society and just like make stupid commentary about things, and not have to worry about, like basically their lives getting ruined by it.
Right.
And I don't think that's just like I just think it's the pendulum sort of swayed. I think before it was the right wing who were the ones like saying no, you can't talk about that stuff. You can't talk about that stuff. But it's definitely swayed the other way.
Mhm. Or I think even like it swings more rapidly between both sides, it seems, at this juncture. Like rather than it seeming like a wave at a time, like between whether it be like the left or right being upset, it
Yeah,
feels like almost on a day-to-day basis. It's just like
yeah.
there's always something because of someone to be upset about for some reason.
That's a I mean, and this is sort of on the same tangent, and I mean, we got to get you off here, man. I'm sorry that we keep going down this
It's
like
all right.
this whole like just digging deeper. But as someone that's recently like I've converted to, I mean, became a Christian like 2.5 years ago. Like that's one thing I has stuck out to me in the Bible is that like you don't really see it that often where like God's just enjoying His creation and like laughing and having a good time with what He's created. It's usually very very serious business.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying I'm like it's a criticism or anything, as who am I to criticize the Bible, but I do like the idea that like if God's here, like He's enjoying it, He's like laughing along with us and like enjoying our lives with us, and it makes me worry too that like there's a lot of people that take Christianity really seriously and obviously very seriously, and I do wish that was a bigger aspect of all religions, is just having a sense of playfulness and not being so like dogmatic and judgy. And um I think that's actually pretty true like for the church I go to, like like it's not judgy at all. Like there's all sorts of people go into there, and the Bible says not to judge people specifically. That's a huge issue. That's a huge thing, obviously, like Jesus talked about. but
Mhm.
that's not a lot of what Christianity's become. And again, like I think we have these like crazy culture wars going on right now where both sides are at each other's throat. And I'm gonna stop because I'm going way too far. So yeah.
On that highly politicized note, we're probably going to close out the podcast. However, we want to thank you all for coming here and joining us today on this episode of the Northern of the North podcast,
Yeah.
episode number 21. One episode past the 20 mark, as I've been told from people who can count. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. For joining Nick and I on our wild and nerdy
Yeah.
ramblings.
Yeah, next week we'll be talking about God and sexuality and our beliefs on specifically the most controversial stuff that's happening in our society.
I will only talk about Marvel and sex exclusively. That's all. No, yeah, we'll probably be talking about what if and then whatever other bullshit we decide to talk about, because whatever, it's our fucking podcast. Deal with it. But yeah, no, please join us next week in episode 22, which we'll be talking about, I think, what'll probably be like a Thor themed what if episode. So well, again, thank you all for joining us today for us and our wild ramblings. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and you all take care.
Goodbye now, you hear? Right, that's the thing.
Goodbye now, you hear?